Hello, on Forest Focus. As Nottingham Forest head to Wolves in the Premier League tomorrow night, we'll discuss some big team selection debates, some unhelpful quotes from John Textor, the latest on the City ground development, and more in the company of, first of all, Pete Blackburn. Pete, morning. How are you?
Morning. Yeah, good. Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, good to have you with us. Good to have Steve Battlemuch back. Second match preview in a row. How are you, Steve?
Yeah, I'm feeling quite honoured, really. So, yeah, good. I'm looking forward to Wolves tomorrow night. Absolutely, in the away end.
He's a proper fixture of this place now, isn't he? I love it.
Yeah, he's a December signing, certainly. We might touch on the January transfer window a little bit later, but let's talk about Wolves, certainly. Pete, kick us off. The psychology of this game is sometimes we stumble on a fixture where the fan psychology is quite interesting, and this is probably one of them because of where Wolves are in the league, our result at the weekend, etc., etc. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, it is interesting when it comes to psychology. I think there's a natural instinct for lots of us Forest fans to get to a game like this and immediately some of the fear kicks in and some of that sense of it always going wrong for Forest, which, a lot of it is the past and it's those sort of deep scars and the trauma and what have you. I'm not sure how relevant necessarily all of that is, but, we carry those burdens, don't we? And that's a big part of what football is, I suppose, for us as fans. I mean, I think what's worth saying is that, you can look at Wolves and you can think about what they've achieved so far this season, which is obviously precious little. There's a Wolves team who I think they only score a goal every other game, and they've conceded the most in the league, and they managed 3 shots on target a game. But you can pull out all the stats, and they're going to be at the bottom or right near the bottom for all of them. But I do think the truth is we're not playing against the 2-point Wolves team. We're playing against a team who will have under a new management team, probably have removed some of the baggage and the scarring of being that side. I think in modern football, we're increasingly, I guess in society in general, we've got this sort of instant culture where everything happens really quickly and we're all looking at the table. Everyone's already saying things like, well, Wolves are definitely down and the bottom 3 is the bottom 3 forever and all that sort of stuff. The truth is, what is this, game 14? There's loads of football left. We've all seen quite incredible things happen in football, and I wouldn't rule anything out. And I guess that goes for what Wolves could be, the Wolves team will face, and it goes for it's everything really. Like the narratives can change so much at this point, but I do think that because there's so many games left, and they've had this change, I suspect that we're definitely not playing that same Wolves team, and it'll be a harder game than what you might see from the stats tables and from what the table itself says. I think if the management team have done any sort of job, they will have got in the heads of the players and made sure this is a proper reset. And actually, if you look at the Aston Villa game, you watch those extended highlights, Wolves look like a side that gave them a fair bit of trouble. And also, I think they're a team that do have ability in fair few areas of the pitch, and I've always felt that. So I think there will be a much tougher challenge than what you might expect from the pure stats. But ultimately, it will be about Forest. We're a better team than them. We've got an awful lot of ability on our side. I think despite the result last time out, our momentum's pretty good. We're in a pretty good moment overall, and I'd fancy us to get a result. But it's not going to be easy, and obviously we all carry that Forest baggage, so there's a hint of fear to it.
Yeah, I do think it'll be a tight game. I know we won there quite comfortably last year, but historically they're quite tight. You watched, I still haven't seen the Villa game myself, but you watched highlights, Steve. We were saying before we started recording, Wolves look decent. So, and are you twitchy about this one or not?
Yeah, I share some of Pete's fears as Forest fans who kind of, they're going well and then they come up against a team down the bottom and we switch off. But I'd have been a bit more worried if we'd have beaten Brighton, ironically, because we've then been continuing that high from, the last few games and then going into the Banana Skin game. Whereas I think having lost to Brighton, Davies is going to get in their heads now and say, look, let's get it back on track. And I had a quick look at the fan line on X on the Wolves Twitter. There's no confidence there in their fan base whatsoever, and they're all putting up memes of, oh my God, Morgan Gibbs White next game. So I think they're sort of fearing for the worst. But you're right. I looked at the highlights against Villa. They gave Villa a really good game at Villa. Lawson is a real handful. You'd want him leading our line, wouldn't you, if we had the option. He hit the bar. He had no disallowed, which was one of those where they down in front of the keeper. So you've seen him give them, seen him not, but he took it really well. It was from a quick break down the right. But they're not great in defence. They're a walking yellow card. I think they've got 4 yellow cards. Could have been a red easily the other day as well. So if they're pumped up in that sort of, let's get one over Morgan, it could be a card fest as well. So we're going to have to keep our heads. But I'm fairly confident that Dyche will set about our team to get our noses in front early, and that we'll come on to that later on the teams. But let's take the game to them. Let's not be thinking of settling for a point. Let's try and get the game won.
Yeah, you look at their team, Pete. I've got it here against Villa. I mean, they are devoid of real like Cunha, like Eight Nori match winners, but they do have good players. We've touted Andre and João Gomez here, Strand Larsen, Pete mentioned. So I think they're better players and more midfield and attack. Their defence doesn't look Premier League quality to me, and maybe the goalkeeper as well. So is this a game where we'll come on to team selection, as Steve says, but let's be front foot, let's try and get ahead and really kill their crowd?
Yeah, I think we have to. I mean, the word we always use in these circumstances is intent, and I think that's what we're going to have to show, and probably just give them, absolutely no sense that there are moments for them to come into the game. I mean, I looked at some of the Opta graphs where they look at the sort of pressure that each team has and how threatening they've been, and to be honest, Wolves just had a sort of period before the end of the first half where they were piling a fair bit of pressure on. So that they can do it, but I think we need to give them no sniff at all. And it's one of those where an early goal would be enormous, I think. So if we can go out there and show some real intent and just try and snuff out any hope that they've got, then I'd love to see that. I think you're right about their team. I heard Dan's story of this parish. I'm not sure if it was on this podcast or another. I heard him say recently that he didn't think that they had any good players. I sort of don't really agree with that, I think. I mean, the midfield 3 from last time out. So we talked about João Gomez. He is defensive brilliance and box-to-box ability. Andre is an absolute precision pass master and a bit of defensive brilliance as well. And then they had Bellegarde in there, I think, last time out as well, who, I mean, we've seen what he is capable of at Forest, and that was not fun to be on the receiving end of. I don't think he's a sort of the consistency of the others, but he does have the ability to carry the ball and he can make things happen. And he also contributes defensively as well. So I think that midfield 3 is tough, and Sangare, particularly if he plays, will need to be alive to the threat of Bellegarde running in behind and getting in that area between our defence and midfield. And then you'll probably need Gibbs White to do a bit of a job on Andre and cut off that ability for him to just relentlessly recycle the ball and some of that passing. And then you've probably got a João Gomez versus Elliot Anderson battle, which I think if Wolves weren't in such bad shape, you'd be looking at 2 players who were on the shopping list of most clubs in the Premier League and may still indeed be. And as you say, as Steve says, Strand Larsen, constant threat up front. I mean, it's interesting if you look at his stats for the last 365 days, as FBref would look at it, you would have absolutely no clue that he was a striker. There's almost no contribution anywhere apart from I think sort of clearances and aerial duels. But watch the Villa game, and that looks like a totally different player, and perhaps emblematic of what I was saying in terms of a new management team surely will have got into the heads of this football side and cleaned away a bit of what's been before and said, look, there's a long time to go yet, and actually we've got some good players here. Because Strand Larsen looked sharp as anything. There were a few moments where he got in front of his centre half and had a chance to finish at the near post, and he was pretty unlucky not to get a goal. At least one. I thought there was also another moment where I think it was Pau Torres just nicked it off his foot at the last minute. And it's one of those games where XG just doesn't tell the story of the game. And I think that's something we need to be wary of, because I think Wolves had like 0.5 XG and Villa had 1 or something along those lines. But actually, there was loads of moments that XG just wouldn't capture, like the one with Pau Torres just whipping it off his foot, and also the offside goal, which, obviously it's not a goal, but it's sort of equally a moment of momentum and threat in the way that, a shot that's blazed over the bar is. So it doesn't tell the whole story. So I do look. I think they're a threat. They've also got athleticism in Chachura out wide, who I think caused some problems for Villa. And then the other concern I would perhaps have is if Arras is playing in that 2 up front, I'd be wary about him drifting over onto Savona and causing some problems there, because we've seen a bit of vulnerability from Savona with players either running at him or ghosting him behind or what have you. So I think there's plenty for us to be concerned about, but the key point of what you've both identified is that their defence and I think goalkeeper are very, very substandard for the level, in my opinion. And we've got players who can get at them. If we play 2 wide men, those wide centre halves are going to be vulnerable. And I can see us, having a comfortable win if we can put into practice the sort of intent and the ability we've got.
Just on Strand Larsen, 14 Premier League goals in 35 games last season. Looked like he was going to go in the summer for quite a while to Newcastle. Only 1 goal this season. I know a lot of Wolves fans are on his back. They don't think he's been working hard enough. Rob Edwards seems like he's come in and maybe given him a kick up the arse or an arm around him or whatever, but got more out of him, certainly. We'll go on to team selection, starting with Steve's in 1 second. But just for that, a word for the Trent Navigation. You'll see an advert for the Take That Christmas gig, Friday the 12th of December. Doors at 7 p.m. Funboy 2 are there as well, so check gigantic.com. This game tomorrow night is on TV, so you can watch it on the big screen if you're not lucky enough to be with Steve in the away end. So do enjoy all the build-up, enjoy the game. And then the post-match celebrations of a win, hopefully. Right, let's go on to our teams then. Sean Dyche did his press conference yesterday, and he sounded pretty confident that Murillo would play and Morgan Gibbs-White. So that's good news. I did ask the chaps to submit their teams without Murillo just in case. I think that's Steve's team. Yeah, I think it is. And I've done one without Gibbs-White just for a talking point, but the other lads have put Gibbs-White in. Obviously, you want Morgan to play and Murillo to play. But just in case, this is Steve's team without Murillo. Sells in goal: Savona, Milenkovic, Jaya Cunha, Williams, Sangare, Anderson, Amari Hutchinson one side, Callum Hudson-Odoi the other, Gibbs-White in behind Igor Jesus. Just talk us through your thinking there, Steve.
Yeah, so for me, there's 3 or 4 things there that struck me when I picked it, which is I think this might be the first time I've picked Sangare in a starting 11 for me. And that probably reflects that I think he's playing probably as well as he's played for us while he's been here. And as someone who loves Ryan Yates and would also have Louise if he was fit, then I think Sangare deserves his start. And I think we miss him when he's not playing at the moment. I went for Cunha if Murillo's not fit, partly because I just don't know when he's going to get a game if we don't play him in a game like this, if we had to. He looked all right against Newcastle in a game where we weren't really, we were in it for 60 minutes till they scored, and he didn't do too much wrong from memory of the Newcastle game. He can't play in Europe, and he came with a lot of plaudits from Brazil. So, I'd like to see Cunha get a game. We probably won't see him till the FA Cup now. Then the big talking points are around who plays either side of Jesus and Gibbs-White. So, like virtually every other Forest fan who's yelling from the sidelines is saying Hutchinson deserves a start, and he does. I think Dyche will probably give him a start. I don't think he necessarily lasts the game, but I think he deserves it, and I think he has given us a real outlet and a real threat and genuine pace, which we haven't had for a while. And then for me, it was a tough call between Hudson-Odoi and Endoi, because I think Endoi probably tracks back really well and sort of is fairly solid and holds his position. But Callum, when he turns it on, he very rarely loses possession, and he's got a great shot from outside the box. And Wolves are the highest team for conceding from outside the box. 8 goals from outside the box they've conceded. So you get tee up Callum from outside the box. Hopefully, one of them will go in. So I think that's a team that could beat Wolves, and particularly if we've got Murillo in there as well, I'd be quite confident of that going into Wednesday night.
That's a very persuasive argument for Callum Hudson-Odoi. I respect a stat like that to win an argument. So, yeah, very good, very good. We'll go on to Pete's, unless I put mine up, but we'll go on to what I think is Pete's team.
Steve, did you actually get that right then? That was your actual team?
Yes, Matt's occasionally comes good.
Well played.
This is, I think, Pete's team. Sells
Times are changing around here, aren't they? Got this one right as well.
I think so. Savona, Milenkovic, also Jair Cunha, Williams, same two midfield, same attack, apart from Dan and Doy for Callum Hudson-Odoi. Has Steve won you over with that Hudson-Odoi long range shot stat or not?
Well, to be honest, I think there's very little in it, and the reason why I plumped for Ndoye is because I've picked Hutchinson on the other side, and I think that Ndoye could be pretty useful in terms of dealing with one of their main threats, which I think is Chachua on the right. I think we'll probably be looking to double up a little bit when he's sort of aggressively getting forward, and Nico may well be in. From the Villa highlights, it looked like Arias was floating out onto that right-hand side quite a lot and picking up a pocket there. So you might see that Williams is dealing with him. And I think Ndoye is probably a better option for helping out in that sense if there's, two players on that right side. So that's sort of why I've gone for him. To be honest, I think this is a team that I can easily pick without any of the pressure of actually having to do this job as a manager. I don't think it's the team that Dyche will pick. I'd be very surprised to see Cunha play there. If indeed Murillo can't play, it'll be Morato, I'd have thought, and I see total sense in that because it's a much more tried and tested partnership, and it actually is probably quite a difficult moment to take someone out because they've had a bit of a nightmare. And then bring in somebody into a relatively high pressure game who's not played much in the Premier League and not played much in any football, overall. So yeah, I think this is a team that it's easy to pick from the safety of your armchair, I guess. And then the same may apply to Hutchinson as well. I think there still may be some questions that Dyche and others will ask about whether he's able to impact for a whole game, whether he's able to do the sort of other side of the out of possession stuff that is so important. I wouldn't be remotely surprised to see Hudson-Odoi and Ndoye start the game, and Hutchinson again being an option to sort of break the game from the bench. The reason I've picked him is just because it feels to me that none of the wingers are really putting their hand up right now in a very serious way. I think Ndoye's put in a lot of shifts for us recently, but he's not having an enormous impact every game. He's having moments. And I don't think you can really say that the end product's been there from Hudson-Odoi either when he's played. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and partly because, frankly, we've not been very good for a fair period of the season. But I think that because Hutchinson's had so many moments, pretty much every time he's come on as a sub, it feels to me like the right thing to do would be to encourage that with a bit of a reward here. But I totally understand that might not happen, and I could see the reasons why. So, like I say, this is a bit of an armchair selection, really, and there are probably more pragmatic things to consider if you're actually the manager of the side in a game that is feels quite important. Sangare is an interesting one. I think it's what Steve said's interesting, and I've also been in that camp where I've probably not very often actually chosen him ahead of others. His form, I think, has been pretty good and getting better all the time. I think there's still a question over what I said about Bellegarde, whether he lets a man go sometimes past him, and that could leave us a bit vulnerable. But I think the more he plays, the better his fitness gets, the more he gets in tune with the players around him and all that sort of thing. The other areas of his game are improving, I think. So there's perfectly good reason to suspect that will too. When he's good, I think he's very good in terms of helping us keep the ball and progress up the pitch. And he's another player who is able to get the ball into those wide men, into Gibbs White, and that's where we're going to cause damage, right? So I think he deserves the place, even though I would potentially argue for Anderson and Dominguez still being the best option on paper in the moment, given that Luiz is out. But yeah, he deserves the spot. Otherwise, there's not really many picks that I think would be under an awful lot of threat, partly because we've got injuries, but also partly because players have started to pick up performances. So that feels like the sort of relatively obvious state to me, but I think there will be questions over whether Dyche will pick Hutchinson and Cunha, certainly.
It was interesting, Steve, yesterday. I don't know if you saw it when we did the show with Kelv, Rob, and Dan. Kelv didn't pick Hutchinson. I said, who would your two wingers be? And he said Ndoye and Callum Hudson-Odoi, because Hutchinson's done great off the bench. Will Dyche trust him defensively? Does he know what he's going to get more from two senior players? And Hutchinson can still make an impact off the bench. So do you see that argument, or do you think Hutchinson just has done so much that you can't really ignore him?
I'm for starting him to see what he's like from the start, because we haven't really seen that. And, you know, we know it's a squad game and he could play 60 minutes and you can swap him out. And we've got another game on Saturday, haven't we? So, you know, horses for courses, you might not want him to start against Everton, for example. But if you're going to start him, why not start him against Wolves and let him run at them from the beginning and scare them a bit? So he does look a bit lightweight. He's probably going to get knocked off the ball more than Ndoye and Callum Hudson-Odoi. Is he going to track back as much? I don't know. But is it a game where he'll need to? So I would get him in tomorrow night and let's see whether he can get us an early goal, you know, an early assist, something like that. Just going back to Sangare and Dominguez. Dominguez is never going to let you down, is he? He's a bit like Yates in so much that he'll give you a really honest performance, and I'm sure he'll come on for Sangare at some point, and you know Dominguez might start at Everton as well. So we are lucky at the moment that even with Luiz out, we've got Yates, we've got Dominguez, we've got options in the centre of midfield. And I don't know about you, but I think Sangare is going to hit one from outside the box at some point. It's going to go in the top.
Hopefully.
He tried last time out, didn't he? And it was it looked threatening for a moment, and then obviously sort of speared wide.
Yeah. But he's had more shots from outside the box in the last 6 or 7 games than he's had in 2 years. So who knows?
Where are you at on Dan Ndoye, Steve? We've talked about him a lot on this podcast. He got a lot of flack on Saturday. He did have quite a disappointing game. I don't think he was quite as bad as people said, and I'm a bit higher on him than some people on in the fan base in general. But he hasn't done what we wanted him to do overall, I think it's fair to say. Where are you at on Dan Ndoye?
Yeah, I think he had a great start to his career with us. He, got that goal and assist quite early on, and I think he's, he clearly has a good link up with Savona in terms of the language, and Savona's still learning the English game and the English language, and Ndoye's becoming one of those interpreter players, isn't he? That sort of gives encouragement, but you can't pick somebody for that, can you? I think he's becoming a bit of someone that people want to have a pop at because people think he's better than his performances show, and so I think what happens is he gets the ball, he looks like he's in a threatening position, but then he goes backwards or sideways and he doesn't take the player on and try and get to the byline or get a crossing. And but I think there's still plenty of time for this season for him to make plenty of contributions. We've got, he's going to be a key player in Europe as well because Hutchinson can't play there. So I don't worry about him dipping out on tomorrow night. He might be back in against Everton. He'll certainly play against Utrecht. So I'm for just giving him a break tomorrow night, certainly from the starting lineup. But I don't think he's a bad player at all.
No. Let's go on to my team, and I'll have a quick chat around that. I don't know if it's going to be the right team or not.
Surely you can get your own team, right?
No, well, you think so? Because they're little dots on the screen, so it's hard to see which one's which. Right. I put McAtee in just in case Gibbs White's out, although it sounds like he's going to play. So my team, if Murillo's out, Sels, Savona, Milenkovic, Morato, Williams, Sangare, Anderson, Hutchinson, McAtee, although it will be Gibbs White, obviously, Ndoye, Igor Jesus. It's interesting listening to both of you there. With Everton on the horizon, I feel like that's not so much of a Hutchinson game. It's more of an Ndoye game, more of a battle. So I think Hutchinson, this game, should really suit him. And he is quite an experienced player for his age. He's played a lot of Premier League football. And he's really put his hand up for a start. So I feel like this game is really one for him. Everton might not be. Mikolenko's a pretty seasoned left back. Everton's going to be a battle. So maybe he doesn't play that one. The Morato one, Cunha, I said this, I don't know if I said this on the air after we finished recording yesterday. If we knew Murillo was out for a month, then I would pick Cunha and give him a run. Let's see what he can do. This is just one game, hopefully. Morato, we've sat here quite a lot this season and said, he's done all right. He's not let us down. And he had a stinking game on Saturday. The thing about Morato is I don't really think he's good enough long term. Like, he's not that good in the air. His passing is never going to be on Murillo's level, but I don't think it's great. I don't think he's like, oh, you know, people say he's Joe Worrall, he's Steve McKenna, Scott McKenna. He's not really Premier League quality. He might be okay, but he's not what we're looking for long term. And Jaya Cunha might be. So I'm really torn over it. But one game, you should be able to get through it. There's the continuity that one of the guys mentioned. Also, I think Davies is kind of a manager who's going to back a player, not take them out of the, if they make an error like that. He backed Michael Keane relentlessly at Everton, and he's finally come good. So my suspicion is, as Pete said, Morato will play. I hadn't even considered the midfield, to be honest, because Sangari's been playing well, but Dominguez is a really good option. Sangari had a really difficult 20 minutes against Brighton, but so did Elliot Anderson, and they actually got quite a decent grip on the game. And I think Sangari is in his best form for us, so I'm all right picking him. And McAtee, I'll bring you in, please. I'll just finish McAtee just quickly.
You're making lots of interesting points that are great for chat. Sorry,
I think they are. Yeah, McAtee, it's sort of a bit like Hutchinson and Cunha, although I've not picked him. Like, if you're not going to pick him in a Premier League game, if Morgan's out, when are you going to pick him? I know he only had 5 minutes again at the weekend, but he actually looked more enthusiastic and brighter, and he just saw something. And I'd just like to see him start against. Admittedly, Wolves are the worst team in the league, despite what we've been saying. So if Morgan's out, I would play McAtee. And Igor Jesus up front is ticking along very nicely despite his lack of goals. Go on, Pete.
Just a few. I think you've made lots of very interesting and very good points. I think on what you said about Sangari versus Brighton, I mean, we were an absolute wreck for that.
Yeah.
20 or
terrifying. Terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, I nearly soiled myself on many occasions. It was not a great place to be right then, was it? Let's face it. And I think also Brighton in that sort of form are pretty much Sangari's absolute worst nightmare. So much movement, pace, fluidity, players flying all over the place. I don't think it really gets worse for him in the Premier League than that. And, you know, this is a very different proposition, isn't it? Let's face it. You know, all due respect to Wolves, I don't expect to see them anything like what we saw from that opening salvo from Brighton, who were incredibly impressive to start off with. Just quickly on Morato, I think I'm really with you. I'd never really been impressed with him. There was a period last year, and I think I've probably said this on the pod before, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself. There was a long period last year where obviously we had this sort of go-to move of being 1-0 up and then Morato coming on. And I think he got an awful lot of credit for what actually was a lot of sort of game state and a lot of colleagues around him doing a very good job defensively. And we were such a good unit. It sort of gained this maybe mythology that bringing on Morato was the way that we closed out games, and it was massively down to what his introduction brought. Personally, I think it's more just to do with the collective, and he benefited from that to a degree. You know, don't get me wrong, he has made contributions, no doubt, but I think there was a sort of extended hyperbole around that, and I don't think it really represented what he is as a player. That's sort of why I think investing in Cunha is a good option, because I've seen so much more in the little performances from him than I have from Morato. I think Morato is frustrating because in many ways it feels like he should be a perfect Premier League defender. He's actually pretty quick for such a massive beast of a man. You know, he's enormous physicality, very imposing. Obviously, left foot as well is a really nice benefit. He can play the ball out pretty nicely. You know, he's got lots of abilities, but I think there's just something. Well, firstly, aerially is one of the great unanswered questions of life, I think, is how Morato can be so poor in the air, given his size and how imposing he is. I find that absolutely bizarre. And against Brighton, you got a pretty good example of that. But also, there's just something lacking in the sort of football brain, I think, where he just makes some mad decisions and doesn't seem to be where you would hope he would be. And you know, I'm not saying this all in reaction to last time out. This is how I've always felt about him. I just feel like he could be a lot better, but I don't know whether you can necessarily fix the problems or not. You know, you'd need someone more like Kelvin to answer a question like that, I suppose. The only other thing I'd say on your selection is if Gibbs White was out, I don't think I'd play McAtee and Hutchinson personally. I think it might be asking a lot in a game where there is a bit of pressure on it, and we do need to be pretty structured as well to have two players who've not played a lot and are both a little bit more on the lightweight side of things. I'd probably go for one tried and trusted out of the two. So whether you push Elliot Anderson up and bring Dominguez in, or whether you Ndoye or Hudson-Odoi instead of Hutch, I'd probably just go for one of those guys.
One other quick thing on Morato. I feel like we've talked about Morato more than any other player this week. It's a bit crazy because he barely played in the first 11. Just being left-footed does give him a slight edge over Cunha, just for continuity as well. I was talking with Seb Hutchinson briefly yesterday, and he said you can read this out about the game. It does raise one interesting Morato point as well. He said he thought the Brighton game, just one of those days, don't think Dyche could have done more to alter the result. Individual errors, and Brighton surprised how they set up on their left side, which is a good point. Morato and Williams struggled to deal with Minter, and that gave space for Max Vifa and De Kuyper to pop up on numerous occasions. Another day Morgan scores, it would have been a different result. Wolves a good fixture to back up. That Morato thing was probably compounded a little bit, Steve, by Nico Williams. Really had a tough game. Savona got caught out. It wasn't a great game for the whole back four, apart from Milenkovic on Sunday. You would hope that wouldn't happen against Wolves, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Pete's right. That first 20 minutes was a nightmare, and we could have easily been 3 down, easily, and we seem to be half asleep at times. I mean, Nico missed about 3 tackles, which is so un-Nico-like, isn't it, to have 3 occasions where we kind of lost out in a 50-50 tackle. Morato seems to switch off. I mean, that's one of his biggest problems. Savona's still learning his trade. I don't think he's really a right back, is he? And that's the problem. I've just listed down who our defensive players are. A lot of them are centre backs, and they're either playing out of position or they can't get inside. And a lot of them are really young, apart from Bolly, who probably should be put out to pasture. So you've got.
Oh no! I hope Danska's not watching.
Dan will kill me for that, but it's whenever Murillo or Milenkovic is out, it's a big step down, isn't it? And because we know Morato's got mistakes in him, Bolly, we think his legs have gone. Zach, he hasn't been given a game yet at centre back. Cunha hasn't really been given a game at centre back. He played at Newcastle, I think, as part of a back three. Savona's being played right back, but I think he's also played as part of a back three in Juventus. Maybe our best centre back for the 2 or 3 years' time is Tyler Bindon, but Sheffield United aren't giving him a game anymore. He played the opening 4 games. They had a nightmare. The manager got sacked who took him there from Reading, and Wilder is not playing him. So I think we need to get him out of Sheffield United in January, put him somewhere else, because he came with a massive reputation playing well for New Zealand. I know he's only been tested at League One level, really. But even in the couple of clips I saw of him in the early part under a really poor Sheffield United side, he looked all right. So he might be one for the future. But you're sort of crossing your fingers all the time, hoping that Murillo's fit, aren't you?
Yeah, we could do a good discussion on who the centre-backs will be in 2027 or something like that.
Yeah.
It'd be a good debate. I don't think it'll be Morato, and I don't think it'll be Bolly.
It won't be Murillo either.
Yeah. No, well, that's the thing. Milenkovic and who's the left foot option? Yeah, that's a tough one. There's a lot of talent, but they're all right-footed.
Bindon's left-footed, I think.
Oh, is Bindon left-footed? Oh, that's
I thought he was right-footed.
Did you? Oh, right, I might be wrong.
Maybe
I've definitely seen him play it right back.
Yeah, maybe he's 2-footed. I don't know. But Cunha and Abbott have got a lot of potential. I just don't know if both get the minutes and the opportunity to play. In
the little bits we've seen of Cunha, and sometimes I feel like you can get sort of under the spell of the hyperbole and that sort of stuff. So there was a lot of talk about how special he was, but in the few bits we've seen, there did look to be something like sort of potentially majestic about him. That he's got this. You
get a vibe about a player's temperament, I think.
There was a sort of clarity about him, and it looked like he had the ability to take the ball and bring it out. And obviously, there's the size, which he'll probably grow into a little bit more. He's probably a little bit more willowy than he maybe will be, but there was something about him that felt like it was worth investing in, I think. It looked like he had a bit of an all-round package. So I would sort of like to see that if we can do it. But it's one of those things, isn't it, where, we probably could have played him in in the Europa League, and he was one of those who didn't make the squad, and maybe the planning has not been ideal in hindsight.
Yeah, Bolly, Cunha over Bolly with hindsight would have been much more beneficial when you look at some of the opponents we played, certainly. Yeah, I think that's fair. Right, let's move away from that game and we'll do a bit on, some more. John Textor, who frankly sounds like an absolute idiot to me, an idiot with money, has spoken to the Times after some quotes around our relationship, or his relationship with Evangelos Marinakis and the transfers, and it's made some headlines. So I'll just read out a few quotes and I'll ask the guys what they think of it. He did a bit for Botafogo fans talking about transfers and things, and there's a quote I'll read out about it and some follow-up quotes from the Times, so just bear with me a bit. This is the quote for the Botafogo fans. I think it's translated, which he complained about. The second part of the question is, you have to understand that you do your best to allocate the transfer price on an athlete by athlete basis. But you also understand that if you have a large relationship and you've been trading players in Brazil and elsewhere, because we're sending players to us in France and we want to send younger players to him in Portugal, right? So that's talking about effectively manipulating transfer fees when you're dealing with individual clubs. And I think Pete might correct me on this, but this is what people have initially picked up on. There's another bit here just saying FIFA and the Premier League have been approached for comments. There's no suggestion that any of this activity amounts to a breach of regulations. Any transfer over £1 million is evaluated for fair market value. So he was asked about this by the Times, and he said, a team owner can say, give me a break on this one. You know I've overpaid for the last one break based on performances. This isn't helpful. Every deal's a negotiation, and you desire to continue trading with a particular owner. You sometimes agree to another owner's perception of value, sometimes forfeiting your own perception of value. These negotiations swing both ways. So I don't think that's particularly helpful quote, but I think the headline is way worse than the article, I would say. But I'll ask Pete and Steve what they think about it. Then he was asked, how a fan of a club might feel if the price for a player has been affected by a deal between two other clubs. Textor replied, it's my money, right? But you're ignoring the rest of the conversation about the same answer. What I object to is people saying there's a sinister relationship between me and Marinakis because people are going after him. What if I have a strategy where I'm clear at creating a regular pathway from Brazil to the Premier League? You can watch a Premier League game between Leeds and Nottingham Forest and see Botafogo players on both sides of the pitch. That's never happened before. I'm sure Botafogo fans are absolutely thrilled to read that. So we'll talk about some general questions about players that we've sold and vice versa in a moment. Pete, like I say, I think the headline's worse than the article. I think Textor's an idiot, and I'd be absolutely terrified if he ever got involved with Forest. But what do you think about it?
Yes, so we have to pick our words wisely, don't we? For various legal reasons. I think it's important to say about John Textor, he is a man who cannot open his mouth without getting into trouble. Every interview he does upsets somebody. I think, in my personal opinion, based on the evidence, I think he seems not very bright. And I wouldn't want him involved in my football club really in any formal way, or indeed informal way. This is a guy who he was going to the Lyon hearings, an incredibly sensitive situation where the fans were, understandably very upset about what was going on. And he was flying over there wearing Botafogo caps and T-shirts and all that sort of stuff. Like, I think there's an insight into somebody who perhaps doesn't always think before they act/speak. But what I'll say about this particular piece is that I think you're right that the quotes within don't really justify the headline. It feels to me like the headline really is just the perception that all of us have considered from the transfer activity that's gone on. We've spoken about it lots of times on this pod that sometimes it seemed some very generous fees in one way or the other and such like. So I don't think any of that is stuff that hasn't been thought about. But I don't think any of the quotes that have actually been discussed here even touch the sides of, potentially how I feel about the situation. So I'm not desperately concerned. I think it's probably not ideal to have informal dealings or regular dealings with somebody who is essentially such a problem in the way he speaks and such like. So maybe in the future it might be best that we don't do an awful lot of don't develop this relationship much further. But honestly, I think the headline's a little bit hyperbolic when you look at the actual quotes. I just think, I'm not sure if I've got much more to add than that. Hopefully I've been careful enough with my words.
I think you have. I mean, I think you say discontinue the relationship in one sense. The problem is, it's not really a problem. I think we just keep coming out on the right side of it. I mean, you can make a case. I'll throw it at Steve, but the players we signed from Botafogo, you can make a case they're fair value in the sense Igor Jesus, he hasn't scored a Premier League goal, although he's played well. Kuyabano, we sent straight back. Jai Cunha, we've discussed, he's only played one game. So if you were Forest, you could say actually those deals are all fine. It's the Niakate, Mangala, Matt Turner ones where you think, well, Lyon really did overpay for those. Turner was signed and then packed off, on loan to the MLS the day after he signed for 7 million or whatever it was. And Danilo going the other way to Botafogo. I mean, I think Danilo's a really good player who's just been desperately unlucky, and I don't think they've overpaid for him at all. And I think Danilo's going to have a really, really good career. So, Steve, there's a lot for you to comment on there if you want to comment on those transfers or just the article in general.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Pete said about, you wouldn't want him as part of your club, and he clearly has got a relationship with Marinakis, and you wouldn't rule out a continuing relationship. But he's not the only one, is he? That we got Battlemuch off to Newcastle, didn't we? On some sort of bizarre deal. So it's happening.
Perfectly reasonable and legitimate transfer fee, that one, Steve.
Absolutely. I'm sure he'll come good for whoever he's playing for. But the thing is, somebody once said to me, "What's a perfect football club owner?" And I said, "Somebody you've never heard of." Because the ones that are in the news are normally in the news because they can't stop speaking or doing stuff that's on the edge. But that article is probably because they want to have somebody to have a boo at, and papers love doing that, don't they?
Let's just take a quick word of thanks for Vesta Blinds. Thank you very much, Vesta Blinds, for renewing their sponsorship, by the way. Appreciate that. James is a big Forest fan, so do check out the link in the description if you're looking for new shutters or blinds made to measure across the East Midlands. Appreciate their support very much, like I say, for renewing. Very good of them. Right, let's move on and talk a little bit about... an exhibition for the new stadium developments for the City Ground. They're changing again. From an article that Danny Taylor's done, it says that the new plans for the Peter Taylor stand would increase the capacity close to 45,000. The stand is going to be absolutely massive by the sound of it, taller than the Chelsea main stand, the Liverpool main stand. The architecture is really interesting. So you both followed this extensively, so I'll ask you both about it briefly. But what do you make of the new ambitions, Pete? And are you going to go down and have a look or not?
I'm hoping to. I've got quite a bit on, but I will try and pop down if I get a bit of time. Yeah, family dependent and such like. I think I know that there's going to be at least one critic of me who is regularly criticizing my views on this. Look, I think that the plans are too big. Personally, I'm unconvinced that as a football club we can sustain demand for a 45,000 seater stadium, and I think, well, I'm yet to see any evidence that contradicts that. And actually, I think the evidence of this season would suggest that that's probably an accurate viewpoint. We're no longer in a position, particularly with the amount of games that we've got, and also the financial situation that many of us find ourselves in. Some worse than others, clearly, but a very difficult time to be spending a lot of money on expensive football tickets. We're not selling out the City Ground convincingly every game. Personally, my approach would have been a smaller expansion, but a significant investment in the quality of the place, because in many areas the City Ground is just not really fit for purpose. And I think a lot of us overlook some of that stuff, and we are very kind in that we sort of joke about running water and that side of things, but actually it's pretty poor. So personally, I'm very much pro expansion. I'm very much pro investing in the City Ground. I believe that is the heart of the football club, and this is where we should be. I worry that this is a little bit too big, and I worry where that could leave us in the future, because I just fundamentally believe that one of the best things about Premier League Nottingham Forest is what it's like when that place is full, when we're roaring the team on. And it concerns me that you could lose a fair bit of that if you've got a sort of 2/3 full City Ground. I just don't see how we're selling out 45,000 tickets week in, week out. It's obviously possible that I'm totally wrong about that stuff, but I think my concerns are coming from a good place of caring. The other issue I've got with it is the sort of ticket price side of things. I think that's another big impediment to us filling the stadium. I just don't think there are enough people in our area who can afford to be going, and the ticket price is going to keep going up. And I'll be very surprised if they aren't also justified in going up in terms of the investment that's been put into the stadium. And for me, one of the first priorities of the football club should be keeping the best things that we've got in terms of a fan base that has been loyal through an awful lot of thin and not a lot of thick. We should be looking to keep ticket prices as low as possible. And it feels to me like the trajectory that we're on with all of this work might ultimately mean that going to Nottingham Forest games becomes increasingly difficult for a lot of people. And I think I would count myself in that, to be honest, as a I'm relatively comfortable financially compared to a lot of people in these very difficult times. But when you've got a young family, you have to make a lot of decisions, and increasingly life is very hard for lots of people. Pressures on our finances are just going up and up. And I sort of worry about the future of a football club that's had such a massive investment in a ground, and where ticket prices are likely to go up to justify that. So look, I've got some concerns. I'm really delighted that there is ambition to invest in the City Ground, because I've argued for so long on this podcast that that's exactly what we need to do, and it would have been a real problem personally, I think, and also pragmatically for the club, had the option to go to Toten that was very much on the table being carried out. So I'm trying not to be too doom and gloom about it, because I do appreciate that this is what we want to see in terms of investment in our home. I just wonder whether a slightly less significant expansion and more investment into the actual experience, and also efforts to try and keep that perfect equilibrium of the place being full, and also a bit of respect and loyalty to the fans who we really want to keep because they're part of the atmosphere, trying to balance that a little bit more. So yeah, I'm not sure if I've really communicated any of that very well, but I've got sort of some concerns, and also obviously some pleasure in that it feels like things are progressing. Ultimately on top of all of that, this has been a long time coming, and who knows whether we'll actually see any of this or not, because let's face it, we've been through this a few times now.
Yeah, I mean, we could do another hour on this, because
sorry, that was awfully rambling, and I wasn't prepared for the chat. I didn't think we were talking about it, and it's very emotive, isn't it? And I know that people will instinctively be irritated by me saying I think it's too big, because that's a sort of an unambitious thing to say. But I just do fundamentally think that there are bigger questions about what the football club is in the community, what our relationship as fans with the football club is, and I worry about us going above and beyond what might be the sensible decisions that keep us at the heart of the football club. Again, I've probably not communicated that very well, but it's hard. There are lots of positives to having owners who are looking to make this sort of investment in our area and in our football club, and things that could bring growth to the area, much needed investment and jobs potentially, but also I think there are balancing factors there.
Yeah, I mean, I think instinctively I agree that it feels like games are selling out much slower now. They are selling out, but there's a lot of resale, a lot of general sale, things like that, which makes you think, well, they're not going to sell 45,000. they must have done market research extensively. There's so much money behind it, but anecdotally, it does feel like they're really struggling. There's an interesting thing I saw we haven't spoken about. The Football Supporters Association signed a plea to lots of organisations to freeze ticket prices for 2 years in the Premier League, which I would like 1,000% support. We've spoken about that a lot on here. And the other thing I'll say before I throw it to Steve is as well, the money isn't in the ticket sales. We know that. Obviously, it is a lot of money relative to us, but relative to a Premier League club, it's not there. So if you're going to do it, then I haven't seen the architecture. I'd be quite interested to see it, but I would really assume and hope that they make the most of the corporate opportunities where people aren't worried about, the financial things that Pete's spoken about, because that's where we can catch up with other clubs. So I'm sure the architecture would have as much of an opportunity to maximise that rather than it wouldn't be a vanity thing, I hope, just to have a 45,000 seat stadium. Because I do think we struggle to fill it. I suppose there's the other thing around concerts and events and making it the East Midlands venue to go to. There's so much more to it. The other thing is the atmosphere at the ground as well, which you could probably do a lot on. And I see a lot on Twitter of people saying it's dead. It was awful v Malmo. It was awful v Brighton. I mean, I thought the Malmo game, there was no jeopardy to it at all. It was like playing a really poor team. So I don't see why there was going to be any atmosphere at all. Sunday games, probably they're not the best atmosphere anyway. Brighton, I don't feel like a huge draw, and I think there is that kind of not apathy around the Premier League, but it's not the first season after we get promoted, so I feel like this is almost inevitable around the atmosphere. I probably should let Steve speak about it. Have you got to go now? I've forgotten what you said. You
no, I'm fine. I'm fine.
That's good. Right, fire in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the phrase that would sum up most fans is "I'll believe it when I see it," and this has been going on for far too long. I went to an exhibition at Forest Ground in 2019 where they showed us the plans for the new main stand, and I had a great chat that night with Chris Cohen, who was still at the club, about what the ground would look like, and we're still here, aren't we? At the end of 2025. Now, the latest impetus is the Women's World Cup bid. I'm making the City Ground one of the grounds for that. And if a bigger stand gets us more international matches, if it gets us concerts, if it gets us other bits and bobs, then that would be, an added bonus. If the argument is, well, we're going to be a Premiership club for the next 20, 30 years and European football is going to be on the horizon for the next, 10 years, why would you limit, why would you do an extension and then need another one? So that's, I think, why we're now at the next stage of saying, well, actually, it's going to be bigger. But there is something about planning, isn't there? Because it was only a few months ago that we got a plan agreed for a smaller stadium. So it's kind of who's making these decisions, at what point are they making these decisions, and is there a real clever plan behind all this that we can't see, or is it just a bit chaotic depending on who's giving advice at what time, what company's trying to get a contract, and what they think they can deliver? There is definitely something about can we fill it, because I think when we first got promoted, there were stats coming out of the club that we could have sold for some games double the amount of seats, than we were there. And that was for the first 2 seasons. Then the third season, we did really well. And obviously there was a clamour. But, we have got to points now where we've had 3 European games where the attendance has been 29,000. Now, some of that is about gaps in the crowd from the away fans, but not all of it. So I think there's something about pricing, both for members, for European games. And one of the arguments I heard for a bigger ground is that you would then be able to allow more season ticket holders, which obviously is in effect cheaper per game. Because if you're a member and you go to every game, you're paying virtually double what a season ticket holder is paying. And that's unsustainable. And no wonder people are then having to pick and choose which games they come to. I know loads of people who would love to come to every game, they just can't afford it. And, I know people who pay for kids and young adults to come who, because they know their young adults couldn't afford to go. So we've got to do something about ticket prices as part of it. But I've always been in favour of us staying at the City Ground, having a better ground, a bigger ground, get more fans in, the fans of the future, look at ticket prices that reflect that. If this now links to a Women's World Cup bid as well in a future Men's World Cup bid, then great. I just think we've got to get on with it. And I'll try and go down and have a look over the weekend. But one of the days they're showing it, I'll be at Everton. So I'd like to have been on a few more days than it is, to be honest.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if Forest, they probably have the data. I don't know if they release it just around the average age of attendees, season ticket holders. And I don't know how you get the data for this, but the affluence of the crowd now, and if it's changed since we got into the Premier League. I mean, like Pete, I'm able to afford tickets for games and quite comfortable, but people must be picking and choosing. I don't know. Did you want to come in there, Pete?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is that the point Steve makes about season tickets is a really interesting and important one. I don't think I'm cynical, but I'm realistic, and I've seen what this Premier League economic juggernaut has been like and what its impacts are. And I don't think there's an example, unless I'm missing something, of a football club taking the decision to give more seats to season ticket holders proportionally, rather than chasing the money of one-off match day tickets. And in fact, I think the evidence from most football clubs is that they're introducing much more stringent ticketing policies, that they're putting punitive measures in place for season ticket holders who don't go to one game or to two games, or who give their ticket to another person, or a friend or whatever. Which all of these things I think are absurd, frankly, and are a slight to all the football fans who have supported their clubs for many, many years and should clearly be able to give their season ticket to their brother if they can't go to a game, for example. So the evidence seems pretty clear to me that season ticket holders are not the people that football clubs want to attract. I hope we're different. I haven't yet seen any evidence that we are different. And if this sort of stadium plan came with a really clear communication from the football club that what we're going to do is we're going to fill this place, and we're going to fill it by offering as many season tickets as we can, by actually, I don't want to shock everyone, maybe reducing ticket prices and filling the place. More seats at lesser prices can still equal more money. And making this like a proper community institution that people can afford to go to and afford to invest in, and that it's therefore best for everyone, because a massive roaring City Ground will propel this football club to success. But frankly, all of those arguments are so anathema to everything that we've seen in this relentless capitalist festival of Premier League football. I don't believe they will happen. And that's not a slight, particularly on our football club or our owners. It's just the way things are. I really hope that's different, and I could get so behind that sort of mission. But what I think we'll actually see is more resale of tickets on third-party sites. We'll see more punitive measures on fans who have season tickets and are, not able to go to a game. And we'll see the club and all clubs chasing the individual cash from people who come for one-off games. And, that can be lots of people. It's not just that's not a tourist thing. That's just people who haven't got access to a season ticket, as Steve says. And I worry about all that sort of stuff, and it's just not the football that I really want to be a part of. So look, that's why there are concerns for me. I think it's a big picture, and it's much bigger than just, are we going to get a shiny stadium that we love? All important stuff, of course, but there's a lot to it.
Yeah, we need Temps on here to put the corporate argument over. I've just been, while Pete was talking there, percentage of attendance at Premier League clubs, so capacity versus season ticket holders. Interesting figures, actually. Ours is, this is as of August 2025 on a website called ticketcompare.com. Ours is 65% of the 30,000 season ticket holders. And then across the Premier League, this doesn't include prices, this is literally just a percentage, some ones I'll pick out. Arsenal, quite high, 75%. West Ham are the highest, which I wouldn't have thought at all, 86%. And then the lowest ones I can see, interestingly, Sunderland is only 53%. I would have thought that'd been much higher. And Liverpool is only 49% of match-going fans as season ticket holders. The one I thought would be Brentford, because they seem like a real community club. Theirs is 58% of a 17,000 capacity stadium, but 65% for Forest is pretty much in the middle, 65.7%. Maybe we're like top half, and ticket prices, I think we're kind of in the middle as well. Could have done loads on that. Just one other quick thing, because I'm conscious of time, Steve. The atmosphere in the ground, we didn't really speak about that much. I mean, maybe that's related to the demographics of the crowd. I don't know. Is it? I think the bigger factor is we've been in the Premier League. This is our 4th year, and people just expect us to win Premier League home games now. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's undoubtedly dropped from, the Championship promotion season and the first season back in the Premier League were off the scale, weren't they? I mean, you would come out of those grounds, you'd be absolutely buzzing from the noise. I can remember games in that season where people were just singing and standing for the last 10, 15 minutes of the game. And it was such a buzz. Now, Malmo was dead, wasn't it? Absolutely dead. And I think Pete's right. There was no jeopardy in that game whatsoever. But even with all the hype and the build-up, there was still no buzz in the ground. It wasn't great against Brighton, but again, we probably the way we started kind of knocked the stuffing out of the ground a bit. But I don't know. There is a sense for me that way back in the day, people used to, when it was standing, people went and stood with their mates in areas where you wanted to sing and shout. And, those days are well long gone. Whether we'd ever get back to in a bigger ground saying, right, we're going to have this bit of safe standing in the new main stand, so an expanded A block and people can transfer in there. But I hate that idea of, that's the singing section. Some clubs sort of promote that, don't they? And say, that's where the singers go. We've just got to get back to the sort of atmospheres of a couple of years ago, and that should come with better performances, with a better buy-in and a feeling for the club, which I think we'll get back with Daesh. And I think if we keep progressing in the Europa League, get ourselves safe in the Premiership, then there's no reason why we can't get that atmosphere back with Forza, with the fans, with the club. But it has gone flat. I've come out of games thinking, "Crap, that is flat."
Do you think, Steve, because you've been going to games longer than us, do we over-romanticize what the Forest atmosphere actually is? Because I remember going in the early 2000s a lot, the 2010s a fair bit when I wasn't working, and it wasn't great all the time. If it was like the A block and maybe parts of the Trent End, and then the rest of the ground was either empty seats or pretty quiet because we weren't half as good as we are now.
Yeah, it certainly. I can obviously, as you remind people how old I am, can't remember
every time you're on. Sorry,
I can remember standing and bouncing up and down in the East Stand and in the Trent End in the late 70s and early 80s, and that was quite a different atmosphere. But that's where the noise came from in them days. And I think we did go through a whole period of the 80s, 90s, 2000s where it was quite quiet in a lot of games. I think things kicked back in with Forza in 2016-17. Forza put stuff back on and thing. Getting the club to allow fans back in the Lower Bridgeford made a big difference. I think there's still a view that we should have the whole of the Lower Bridgeford and we should find a different place for away fans. And, maybe that would come in with the new stand as well. But yeah, there wasn't necessarily a glory day. To me, the best the fans have been was the playoff season and the first season back in the Premiership. I don't think we've bettered that.
No, I think so. Right, we should wrap things up. We've done over an hour for what was supposed to be like a 30-minute match preview. And I just kept adding things to the list, as I often do. But really interesting discussion around lots of things. I mean, I had more things on the list as well, but we won't do those today. We'll do those another day. A couple of quick things. People probably won't have heard of Thomas Federspiel, but it looks like he has left the club. Well, he has, because according to his LinkedIn, he has gone from Forest to Newcastle, of course. Assume that, perhaps inaccurately, that Ross Wilson has headhunted him. He was Forest's main scout in South America, so you would imagine had a big influence on finding Murillo initially. So it feels like a loss, but I don't know too much beyond that. The other thing I'll just say before I throw it to the guys for final thoughts is I saw on Twitter last night that Brennan Johnson has donated again to a charity drive by Guru Nanak's Mission, where they look to supply food parcels to people in the city. He's given £1,000, so well done to him. Will Tomlinson, WT Analysis, put on Twitter that he will donate £5 to this great cause for every goal Forest score in the Premier League and Europe in December. So we as a podcast, not Steve and Pete, but we as a podcast will match that through December, £5 a goal. So let's see how many Forest bang in. I mean, we scored a lot of goals recently, so it could be out of pocket. That Brighton one was a bit of a red herring, not scoring. We could have scored 3 or 4 in that game. So well done.
Matt, Steve and I were discussing this before, and I think we're happy for you to donate our large appearance fees to the charity as well.
I'll do that. I'll do that. People will see how much you get when we finally put the money in. So let's hope Forest score some goals in December. I'm sure they will. We've got some games coming up where I think they will. Right. Pete, any final thoughts before we go?
Just quickly, I guess, and people will laugh at that because I've spent about 6 hours talking today. Sorry for that. Slightly concerned I haven't communicated very well today, but these are really emotive topics, aren't they? So I think I just encourage people to try and understand the sort of nuance and other people's views and concerns about it, because I don't think any of this stuff is really simple, and there's a lot to it. The other thing is, thanks to Brennan Johnson. I mean, what a great example of a guy still keeping the community that he was born and raised in at his heart. And, anyone who snagged him off during that famously unpleasant period should hang their heads in shame, because he's clearly a good young man and somebody who's kept Nottingham in his heart since moving on. So all the best to him, and thanks to him for that.
You spoke about communication and how it's all nuanced. You didn't say what you were referring to as the nuanced thing there, so I assume it was the stand and not just the Wolves game.
I like to think I'm generally nuanced, but probably not so much about what the Wolves game. You tell you what, I did well today, because anyone who's listened to me speak about Wolves before will know that I'm not a big fan, particularly after all their unpleasantness towards Morgan Gibbs-White, and particularly to Morgan Gibbs-White's wife. So I will just say something totally unnuanced. I hope we absolutely smash them. I hope Gibbs-White personally absolutely smashes them, and hope every single one of those who sung those horrible songs about Morgan Gibbs-White's wife or fiance or whatever, sorry, I'm not too familiar with their situation, will be forced to it really just live in that moment of him shaming them. So there's your nuance.
His goal there last season was one of the best goals of the season because of that,
yes.
Certainly. Steve, we're an hour and 10 minutes. This is one of our longest podcasts.
Can we just keep going? Should we do a 24-hour?
Well, I've got 2 quick things just to plug. Ben Osborne put on Twitter last night that he's now played 400 appearances professionally. 212 of them were for Forest. So we had the best of him, I think. And he'll always be remembered for that goal away at Derby, but also that fancy free kick, with a flick up and the lob. So good on Ben. He's currently, I think, at Stockport on loan in League One. And finally, a plug from me for topical for the Supporters Trust, because you look what's happened to Sheffield Wednesday. Another points deduction this week. Club, put into rack and ruin by a dodgy owner. Supporters Trust kind of helping the club out. Ours was set up when we thought our club was going to go the similar way under Fawaz. It's taken a bit of a back seat when the sort of ownership issues settled down a bit at Forest, but it's still there. Democratic organisation, members decide what the policy is of the Supporters Trust. So, please consider being a member of that as well.
Yeah, just very quickly to make this longer.
Just very quickly.
I know we all want to make this nice and long. I've also recently, I don't think Steve left, but I've recently rejoined the Supporters Trust, particularly because James Bogue a big Forest focus supporter and I think advertiser, is now involved and on the board, I believe. So having had some conversations with him and some of the other people involved, I'm sort of back to believing that this is an organisation that can play a really important role. And regardless of that, I think Steve's totally right that we should remember that there are good times, there are bad times. Owners come and go for various reasons. Anything can happen in football, and lots of clubs have fallen on very, very difficult times. Chances are it will be us one day in the future, because I think it will be most clubs, because let's face it, we're all relying on an awful lot of investment, external investment, and that's never going to be actually sustainable. I'd encourage anyone to have a think about rejoining, because one day we may be needed as a collective, and that's our best strength as a collective.
Yeah, big shout out to James Bogans, Treenline Growth Business, that sponsor us. Appreciate James's support.
Great lad.
If you are still here at 1 hour 12 minutes, do write still here in the comments, just so I can do some market research to find out if people watch this live. I'll see how many still here comments make it into the YouTube comments. Do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe, consider membership or Patreon, or a lovely 5-star review on Apple or Spotify would be great. We shall be back tomorrow or today. If you're a member, you'll get the opposition preview with Ryan Lester, and then post-match show tomorrow with Mark and possibly Lewis, but if not Lewis, then one of the other guys will jump on with Mark, and then we'll be back on Thursday to turn our attention to the Everton game. I'm not going to last for any final thoughts. I'm going to say Pete Blackburn, thank you very much. Steve Battlemuch, thank you very much. And if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.